Suleiman swore he would never execute him. 13 years later, he did. And the question that historians still argue about today is, whose idea was it really? Pargalı Ibrahim Pasha, the son of a Greek fisherman from Parga, kidnapped by pirates as a child, sold into slavery. And yet, he rose to become the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire, the second most powerful man in the world. So powerful that Venetian diplomats called him Ibrahim the Magnificent, borrowing the very epithet of Sultan Suleiman himself. For 13 years, he commanded armies, negotiated with kings, and shaped the fate of an empire. Suleiman treated him like a brother, gave him a palace, swore an oath that he would never be executed. And then one night in March 1536, Suleiman invited him to dinner. They talked for hours, like old times. And when Ibrahim fell asleep, the executioners came. He was 42 years old. Today, we're going to answer the question historians have been arguing about for 5 centuries. Whose idea was it really? And why, knowing what was coming? Did Ibrahim choose not to run? Parga, around 1493, a small coastal town on the Adriatic, at that time part of the Republic of Venice, a Greek Orthodox Christian family, a fisherman father, a boy who would have had no reason to imagine his life becoming anything other than ordinary, and then pirates. He was kidnapped during a raid sometime between 1499 and 1502, sold into slavery. The world he had known disappeared completely. He ended up in the household of Iskender Pasha, an Ottoman governor near Edirne, a wealthy home, an educated environment, and crucially, a place where a clever boy with the right qualities could be noticed. He was noticed. He received an education, learned languages, Turkish, Persian, Greek, learned to play the violin, a skill that would later become one of the personal bonds between him and the prince he was about to meet. Around 1514, Ibrahim met the young Prince Suleiman at Iskender Pasha's home near Edirne. 2 young men, one a prince, one a slave, and something between them that neither rank nor circumstance could fully explain, a genuine friendship. Suleiman brought him into his personal service. And when Suleiman became sultan in 1520, Ibrahim rose with him, faster than almost anyone in Ottoman history. So fast that Ibrahim himself became uncomfortable. He went to Suleiman and asked him, quietly, with the kind of honesty that only real friendship allows, not to promote him so rapidly. He said the other viziers were watching. That jealousy was building. That moving too fast would make enemies faster than he could manage them. Suleiman listened, and then made a promise. He swore, formally, sincerely, that Ibrahim Pasha would never be executed during his reign. 13 years later, he broke that promise. But not alone. In 1523, Suleiman appointed Ibrahim Grand Vizier, the most powerful position in the Ottoman Empire after the Sultan himself. What followed was 13 years of almost unchecked authority. Ibrahim commanded armies. He led the Danubian campaigns of 1526 and 1529, including the Siege of Vienna. In 1525, he traveled to Egypt to reform the entire provincial administration, creating a new legal code, the Kanuname, that restructured how the richest province of the empire was governed. In 1534, he occupied Tabriz. 5 months later, Baghdad fell. He negotiated with the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V over Hungary, conducted preliminary talks with French representatives in Constantinople in January 1536, just 2 months before his death. His word carried the weight of the Sultan's seal. Venetian diplomats watching from the outside gave him a name that told you everything about how the world perceived him. Ibrahim the Magnificent. The same epithet as Suleiman, 2 magnificents in one empire. Suleiman gave him a palace on the Hippodrome, one of the most prestigious locations in Constantinople. The building still stands today as the Museum of Islamic and Turkish Arts. He also gave him a wife, a connection that contained its own quiet irony. Muhsine Hatun, the granddaughter of Iskender Pasha, the same man who had once owned Ibrahim as a slave. The boy who had been property in that household, now married into it. Power, wealth, friendship with the most powerful man on earth, and a promise that his life was safe. But power at that scale attracts enemies. and Ibrahim had made one enemy in particular who would not stop until he was gone. Her name was Hurrem Sultan, known in the West as Roxolana, a Ukrainian slave girl who had risen to become Suleiman's legal wife, something almost without precedent in Ottoman history. A sultan did not marry his concubines. Suleiman did. And in doing so, he gave Hurrem a position of power that had no clear historical template. She was intelligent, patient, and she understood politics the way Ibrahim understood military campaigns, as a long game played through relationships, information, and timing. Ibrahim and Hurrem had been circling each other for years. He was the oldest friend. She was the legal wife. Two people with complete access to the most powerful man in the world. And fundamentally incompatible interests. Ibrahim had long supported Shehzada Mustafa, Suleiman's eldest son, born of another woman. The crown prince, the natural heir, the boy who would become sultan when Suleiman died. Hurrem had her own sons. And as long as Mustafa lived, her children's path to the throne was blocked. Everything Ibrahim represented, his loyalty to Mustafa, his independent power base, his friendship with Suleiman that predated her by years, was a threat to everything she was building. Historians still argue about exactly how much of what followed was Hurrem's calculation and how much was Suleiman's own growing fear. The two are not mutually exclusive. What is certain is that Ibrahim gave his enemies something to work with. During the campaign against the Persian Safavid Empire, he awarded himself a title that included the word Sultan, Sarasker Sultan, the title of a commander, but with the word that belonged only to one man in the Ottoman world. Suleiman heard about it, and something shifted. The title Sarasker Sultan, three words that changed everything. In the Ottoman world, the word Sultan belonged to one person, one bloodline, one throne. For anyone else to attach it to their name, even in a military context, even in the field, even far from Constantinople, was not just presumption. It was the language of a man who saw himself as equal to his master. Whether Ibrahim intended it that way, nobody knows. He had been accumulating titles for years with Suleiman's blessing. Perhaps he stopped paying attention to where the line was. Perhaps he thought their friendship made him immune to what that word implied. He was wrong. Suleiman was a man who had executed his own sons when he felt threatened. A man for whom the throne was not just power, it was identity, religion, destiny. The idea that his closest friend, his appointed grand vizier, a former slave from Parga, was styling himself sultan, landed somewhere that friendship could not reach. And Hurrem was there, watching, patient as always. What she said to Suleiman in those weeks, nobody recorded precisely, but the direction of her influence is not hard to read. She had sons who needed a clear path. She had years of carefully constructed proximity to the Sultan. And now, finally, Ibrahim had given her something concrete to work with. The decision was made. Ibrahim reportedly knew. Sources say he was aware of what was coming at least 7 days before it happened. He did not flee. March 5th, 1536, Constantinople. Suleiman invited Ibrahim to dinner, just the two of them. The way it had been so many times before, two men who had known each other since youth, who had shared campaigns and councils, and the particular intimacy of people who had grown up together inside the same walls. They talked for hours. The accounts that survived described the evening as peaceful. No confrontation, no accusations, no final reckoning between a sultan and the man he was about to destroy. Just dinner, just conversation, just two old friends at a table. And when Ibrahim finally retired to his quarters for the night, the executioners were waiting. He was strangled in his sleep, or trying to resist. Accounts differ. Some sources say there were marks of struggle, that he fought, that it was not the clean end that the official silence around it implied, that the walls of the room bore the evidence of what it actually cost to kill a man who had once been promised he would be safe. He was 42 years old. By morning, he was gone. His vast fortune confiscated by the state. His palace on the Hippodrome passed into other hands. His name removed from official records as thoroughly as the Ottoman bureaucracy could manage. And Suleiman, the man who had ordered it, went on. He continued to rule for another 30 years. He conquered more territory. He built more monuments. He became the figure history remembers as magnificent. But he kept writing poetry, long after 1536. And some of it, scholars have noted, reads like a man who could not stop thinking about someone he had lost. So let's go back to where we started. Suleiman swore he would never execute him. 13 years later, he did. And the question historians have been arguing about for 5 centuries. Whose idea was it really? Here's what we know. Hurrem Sultan had the motive. Ibrahim supported Mustafa, the son who stood between her children and the throne. She had years of proximity to Suleiman, and when Ibrahim gave her something concrete to work with, the title Saraskar Sultan, she had the opening she needed. But Suleiman was not a man who did things against his will. He had executed sons. He had broken oaths before. The fear that Ibrahim's self-awarded title planted in him was real. The fear of a man who had risen so high that the word sultan no longer seemed out of reach for him. The most honest answer is both. Hurrem accelerated what Suleiman's own fear had already made possible. And Ibrahim, the man who knew what was coming 7 days before it happened, who had every reason to flee, the resources, the connections, the time, who chose to stay, who sat at that dinner table knowing it was the last meal. Why? The most likely answer is the simplest one. He believed, until the last possible moment, that the friendship was real, that Suleiman would not actually do it, that the oath meant something. He was wrong, but he died without running from the man he had trusted most. Suleiman kept writing poetry about him for 20 more years. Make of that what you will. His grave was found 2 centuries later, in the basement of a shop in Constantinople, hidden, unmarked, as if the empire itself wasn't sure what to do with the memory of the man it had erased. Write in the comments, do you think it was Hurrem's plan or Suleiman's decision? And if this story surprised you, you're already in the right place for more.